Excellent. There we go. Well, very good. Welcome. Welcome. Appreciate you being here. I am super excited to have this conversation. This has been brewing for a few months now, but really poignantly the last couple of weeks. Part of it started from I've been to a few different events this year, wanting to experience participant as much as I experience facilitator. And it was interesting to notice. I've been to a few events where there was an AI panel, some people talking about technology and AI today. And as I listened, I started realizing I know a lot more about AI and technology and our relationship with it than I realized. There are a lot of things that I took for granted in terms of the ways that I've used it or explored it, or even some of the prognosticated outcomes of how it's going to inevitably lead to our doom, and some really interesting information about that, or the unoriginal, antiquated argument that it's going to replace all our jobs, which I don't know that there's ever been a major innovation in the world, industrially, agriculturally, or technologically, that hasn't been a big fear, hasn't been a big hustle and bustle about it. And I want to keep things as rooted as possible in the actual biointelligence of our human experience. That's the unique element that I feel like I bring to the market, to our approach. Not because it's the only thing that I do or the only place that my expertise lies, but because it's the thing that seems to be lacking the most in people's approach professionally and personally and in the different areas of their life, is the techniques, the strategies, the approaches tend to get a lot of the airplay. And they tend to get the sexy response, the step one, two, and threes to making $1 million, the ways to get rid of here's the 10-step program to get rid of your procrastination and whatever else. And when you start realizing that how to do things is the easy part, the proposition of doing it, meaning the idea of doing it, is the easy part. But we love it. We love the idea of doing things. We love the aha. We love the, oh my gosh, that they said it so simple. That must be why I'm not doing it, because I was just making it so complicated. But now I can make it simple. Well, yes, and there's a deeper reason why you're making it complicated. There's a deeper reason why your mind feels like it seems to race. There's a deeper reason why so many people today feel like they need to attach an acronym to their personality and to who they are, whether it's OCD or ADHD. And that is with tremendous respect and deference and appreciation for people that have pathological challenges with that because of some really sensitive things. But for a lot of us that are just feeling like, yeah, I can definitely relate to that. There's a lot going on. There's deeper stuff happening. There's deeper disconnects of safety. There's disconnects caused by the trauma and the shame and the attachment wounds that distort our original instructions. And so I'm hoping tonight we can have a conversation about AI. We can have a conversation about technology. We can have a conversation about what we are actually experiencing today, and be able to talk about some of the technical aspects, be able to talk about some of the things that can be really helpful, even some of the things that seem a little scary right now. Not to convince ourselves they're not scary. I think the feeling of fear is important to be felt. But I think a lot of us are relying on the story of that fear to solve it or diagnose it or fix it or get rid of it. And we tend to approach it as an infliction, fear, depression, anxiety, all these things. We tend to look at them as an infliction rather than as the signal they're meant to be, rather than noticing that feeling and going, huh, I wonder what I'm actually feeling, meaning the sensation. We're so quick to say, I'm feeling fear, but what does that actually feel like in your body? Does it feel like a tightness in your chest? Does it feel like a turning in your gut? And being able to actually be with those sensations allows us to be more present with the body. And there's something really interesting about that. I find really interesting. I heard it said the other day that the body doesn't need to be taught mental health. It's already mentally healthy. It already knows how to find peace and joy and balance and all those different things. The body doesn't need to learn how to heal. In fact, in some cases, you could argue it doesn't actually need to heal. Most of the paradox, the cosmic joke of a lot of things, including in some ways with being sensitive to those of us who are going through that journey, myself included, is that we tend to feel like there's something wrong. Then someone helps us name what's wrong. Then we try and fix or heal what's wrong. And then we get to the other side of it and realize there was nothing to actually fix. There was nothing to actually heal. There was just noise in the way of our body. There was noise in the way of being present. And while that may be a little bit of semantic gymnastics, I think that there are some real benefits to loosening our grip on what we think we're so sure is actually happening to us. Or in this case, what has happened to us. So, and the speed of technology is just making that grip tighter. And so that's where I want to start tonight. I want to talk about, before we dive into the technology itself, into how to use it, I want to talk about what are we actually feeling? What are we actually experiencing right now in this technological light speed era of life? And that is essentially the primary thing that we're feeling, is we are feeling speed. We are feeling and experiencing life at a speed. We are experiencing information at a speed unlike we have ever experienced before. And what's interesting about that speed is it causes us to have a contraction. Just like if you were in a car and accelerated really fast, the first thing you're doing is looking for something to hold on to, something that feels like it's still, something that feels like it's stable, even though the whole vehicle is moving super fast. And that tends to be what we do in this space, is we look for something to grab onto. And we love to grab onto what used to work. We love to grab onto the good old days. We love to grab onto back to the basics. And oftentimes we love to double down on our grip of control and our grip of certainty. And this can make things feel even more out of control. This can make things feel even scarier, especially when your mind starts to speed up faster and faster and faster. What do most of us tend to do when our mind is going fast? We try to make our body keep up. We try to work fast. We try to get things done. We try to convince ourselves that there's some finish line, that this speed and this overactive mind and all the go, 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 get things done, busy, busy, busy. Once we get to this point, then we can set it down. But even if we got to the actual finish line we set out for, which most of us burn out enough times before we get there that we may not arrive, but if somehow we make ourselves get there, which I think some of us have been able to do a few times at least, that rest doesn't come. The need to recover from the burnout of go, go, go certainly comes, but the actual rest, which is different from recovery, the recovery is to get back to status quo. The rest is where expansion happens. The rest is where you get an opportunity to receive and to embrace. And it's interesting, the universe will meet you where you are. It'll meet you in what you want. If you feel like you need to pursue your dreams, pursue what you want, the universe is happy to comply and give you something to chase. Unfortunately, it usually runs faster and longer and more consistently than we do. However, if we can learn to be right here, be right now, and not have this insatiable, relentless desire to be somewhere else, which is what drives that desire for pursuit, which is what creates that idea that we call perfectionism, which is really just not enoughism. It's never good enough. It's never enough. It's not that we're actually chasing perfection. Most of us have figured out a long time ago cognitively that that's not possible. But why do we continue to display perfectionist pursuits? Because it's never enough. And all of these things get perpetuated. All these things get amplified in the speed of what's happening right now. I heard this put really beautiful by Michael Neal in the Inside Out Revolution. He talked about, what if our minds, our overactive minds, had a gauge on them, like a tachometer on a car that shows you the RPMs. And for those of us of my generation and older that have actually driven a manual vehicle, and we remember what it's like to play with the clutch and you get a feel. At first, you're looking at the RPMs while trying not to crash, so you can kind of see like, oh, it's at 4,000. It's time to push in the clutch and shift. But eventually, you get a feel for that. You can feel where the RPMs are on the tachometer. But imagine we had something like that for our minds with thoughts. So rather than RPMs, it was TPMs, thoughts per minute. And Michael Neal gives this beautiful but simple breakdown that I think is quite eye-opening. So imagine we're looking at this gauge, and 0 to 50 TPM, 0 to 50 thoughts per minute, provides deeper wisdom and beautiful feelings. Deeper wisdom and beautiful feelings. Then 50 to 100 TPM, thoughts per minute, provides healthy functioning and good feelings. Healthy functioning and good feelings. Then we go to this 100 to 200 thoughts per minute. Now we're looking at the beginning of overload, and we're looking at mild stress. So we're looking at mental overload, the beginning of overload, the start of overload, and mild stress. Okay, but still manageable. But when we find that to be manageable, as we love to do, especially in America, let's go get more. We want more. That is one of our rights. One of our distinctions of freedom is that we can always pursue more, regardless of consequence. And so we push to 200 to 300 TPM, 200 to 300 thoughts per minute. And now we're spinning out of control. And we're in constant stress. We're in persistent stress. Okay, but we're trying to get to that finish line. Now we're starting to heavily dissociate. We're starting to heavily self-abandon. Why? So we can keep convincing ourselves that this is what we want, that we want to keep going. We don't want to keep going. We just want to be done. We want to get to the finish line. And so most of us will push to over 300 TPM, as he talks about, which is total mental breakdown and extreme stress, like to where it starts really significantly impacting your body and your health and your autoimmunity and different things like that. Imagine if we had a gauge that showed us that. Imagine if we could see like, okay, we're at a TPM that's like, wow, this is where wisdom comes from. This is where we receive. This is where we learn. But then if we feel distorted or unsafe, then we feel like we need to speed up. We feel lazy. We feel like we're not doing enough. So we speed up and we're still okay. Things are still good. Then it gets harder. And now things are starting to feel mildly stressful but manageable. But then before we know it, we're on that slippery slope, as they talk about. And now we've got constant stress and then eventually complete overload and burnout. Kind of an interesting way to look at our fighting fire with the speed of today and the way that our thoughts can go crazy. There's a lot of conversation out there. There's a lot of conversation about how if you can just learn to control your thoughts, that you'll have a much better life. But what if the thoughts are the exhaust pipe? What if they're simply an output of the engine of what's actually happening in the alignment of you? You know? There are some people who actually have more alignment than they realized, so they just needed to be taught to be a little bit more sensitive to their language. They just needed to journal a little bit to release some of the pressure up here. They may not have been over 300 TPM, in those thoughts per minute. They may have been more in like the mild stress. And so they heard something like that and it softened the edge and suddenly their life was amazing. But then, as it tends to happen in the guru, influencer, coach, speaker space, they assume because that's all they needed, that must be all anybody else needs. You just need to be more conscientious of your thoughts. You just need to journal a little bit more and your life will be amazing. And here's 100 other people that did that and it was amazing. And there's thousands of people in the room and hundreds of thousands of people on the email list. And 100 of them convince 100,000 that that's all they're going to need to do. And then when it doesn't work, whose fault is it? Well, usually it was ours. We feel like we're just kicking against the wall to try and blame them. There must be something wrong with me. Didn't you hear all those people talk about that all they did was create a vision board and do some journaling and everything unlocked for them? As long as there was more than one, we'll tend to believe that it must be us. That's the problem. But it's not. It's not a problem, and it's not something you're choosing to do. It's something that you fell into in your survival strategies and your emotional relational strategies that mixed with the speed that is being created by technology today, even though the birth of it, the catalyst of this was convenience. We don't have a nervous system built in such a way that we could actually allow convenience. It's really interesting when we find ourselves in a place where safety feels unsafe, where convenience feels inconvenient, where self care does not feel good. That's an interesting place to be because we've been so convinced that all of that stuff is there. It's not here, it's there. It can't be here, otherwise, I don't have the motivation to get there. It can't be here, otherwise, I don't have the drive and the passion, which is a willingness to suffer, by the way, to get there. That's interesting. So even if I somehow made there here, what I've built is the pattern of here is not good. There is good. So as soon as there becomes here, we move the goalposts and we do it again. And all that's happening with the speed of technology is we're speeding it up. But there's something really interesting happening today with artificial intelligence. There's something happening today that seems to be a little bit different. Certainly a lot faster, but there seems to be some other things emerging from this technology, from this particular platform. It's changing and it in and of itself is rewriting a lot of the rules faster than we can keep up with, faster than we can realize. And there's actually something kind of extraordinary about that. In fact, I'll share with you personally what I believe is what's going to happen. This is my just one opportunity tonight to prognosticate and predict what I believe based on my own hunch, which really I love. I forgot who said it, but it said, "What is reality other than a collective hunch?" It was a famous actress, I think, from the 50s or 60s. And this is my hunch. This is my prognostication as to what AI is actually doing. I believe that we, as a collective consciousness, and yes, I hear how strange that can sound in certain circles, I believe we are manifesting or bringing about or driving this technology to, like a shuffleboard, to be able to push certainty and to push our illusion of control so far out of reach, so fast, that we won't be able to hang on to it. Well, why on earth would we want the illusion of control that gives so many of our busy minds comfort? And why would we want certainty, which gives us a predictability and a certain safety, or at least the illusion of it? Why would we want that ripped out of our hands so quickly and pushed so far out of reach? Because of what would fill in the gap. And that would be wonder. That would be wonder, wonder and awe. Every renaissance in human history has eventually produced wonder of some kind. And oftentimes it is when society has become so sure, so certain, so in control that something shows up that you can look at in history as some kind of destruction or fall. But more often than not, when you look at the human model, what actually happened, the fall or the destruction was not the actual thing that occurred. That was a natural outcome, depending on how you look at it, of something greater emerging. Now, the more attached we are to that control, the more attached we are to certainty, the more attached we are to the society that creates it, or the institution that creates it, or the belief system that creates it, the more painful and scary that destruction can feel. But I believe that may be where we're headed, is getting it pushed out so quickly, we won't know what happened. And then we just may, and I'd like to believe we will, get back to that wonder that we were born with, that awe that we crave. It kind of reminds me a little bit of how I like to think about social media. I came from the latchkey generation. I came from drinking from hoses, and summertime we'd never see our parents except for when we came home to grab some sandwiches, and then late at night just so they knew we were still alive. And And it's interesting, as amazing as that was, and there are a lot of things about that that were amazing. There's a lot of things about that that are difficult as a parent today to like let our kids be out, even though statistically it is safer for them than it was for us, which is wild. It just doesn't feel like it is because we hear about everything now. You used to only hear about what happened in your neighborhood, maybe in your state. Now we hear about everything that happens to everyone all across the world instantly. And so it feels like it's way more dangerous out there, but it's statistically not. But what's interesting is my generation, and probably the one before it to a certain degree, as much freedom as we had in that, we didn't feel seen. We didn't feel seen by the people we admired. We didn't feel seen by the people we wanted to look up to. We felt seen by each other and our friends. That's why we would go feel unseen together. And there was value in that support and that camaraderie, but we didn't feel seen. And isn't it ironic that after even a few generations of not feeling seen and wanting to feel seen and room to be seen, we weren't all working on farms anymore. We didn't all get up with the sunrise and work endlessly until sunset. Like there was room to be seen, to connect, and we didn't feel it. That somehow shortly after, ironically, we manifested the greatest platform for being seen easier and by more people than ever before, social media. Are there some careful what you wish for kind of things from that? Sure. Sure. But I like to think about it in terms of like, we wanted that, you know? And maybe like a genie, we weren't as specific enough about what we wanted that we got a little bit more than we asked for. But I think that's interesting. And I like looking at things like this because it gives us an opt-in kind of feeling, an opt-in kind of energy. So much of the pain and frustration we feel in our lives comes from forgetting that we opted in. You know, I don't want to convince anybody that you opted in. And if you're in a really painful spot, that can be even more painful to consider at first. However, it's one of the more helpful things that I've ever found is to consider, to play with, to sit in the puddle of what if I opted in for this? And what if the version of me that opted in for this had maybe just a little bit more perspective than I have right now? And was like, oh, I've never felt those things before. I've never felt human before. I think I'd like to try that out. And now here we are. And we're spending way too much time wishing we weren't or wishing it was different. Not to mention, depending on how you want to look at it and wear it in your belief system, we opted into what probably in the eternities was a glimpse, was a blink of an eye. And I think it's kind of interesting to consider that. Not as a way to bypass, but as a way to feel all of this. And it can be hard with how fast things feel like they're going to feel. But let's talk a little bit more about artificial intelligence and what I think are some really fun ways to look at it. Some philosophical frames that could allow us to feel a little bit more playful with it, a little bit more meaning from it, rather than this robot that's taking over the world or going to lead to some Skynet Terminator extinction. Okay. First, let's look at artificial. I'm a huge fan of words. I'm kind of a word nerd. I love etymology. And the roots of artificial are art maker. A maker of art is the root of artificial. I think that's very interesting. It wasn't until later that it was used as a term for like fake, or not real. So what I think is interesting about that is if we take our artificial intelligence as the art maker and we take authenticity, which is self being self, being you, we can have some fun with that. That I think kind of gives us a little bit more of a playful frame. What if artificial intelligence is here to be an art maker and we are here with our authenticity to be art? We can make it. We can use AI to make it, and we can be it. And because AI is making it, it's scalable, which allows us to become irreplaceable. Okay? There's a lot of people that are afraid that AI is going to replace them. Coaches I work with, okay? And just about every major industry out there. We're seeing it. Jobs are getting cut. And in that frame, in that particular company, I can see like, ooh, that feels like it's shrinking. But if you look out there, as with most times that there are technological advances, there are more opportunities being created than being taken away. It's kind of like your email, another technology that's actually still fairly recent to our society. You ever noticed how when you respond to all of your emails, you only get a short period of time to feel really good because you are about to get more responses than you actually responded to? Because you're going to get a certain number of new emails that you didn't have, and you're going to get responses to a bunch of the emails you just responded to. So you're going to have more the next day than you had the day before, even though you felt like you were making progress. So imagine like getting those emails read, getting them responded to is like the jobs that are being lost. But the next day, they're going to be even more that are going to show up. Does that make sense? There's an expansion occurring if we can zoom out. But remember, when things are going really, really fast, we tend to contract. We tend to pull things down and in. Things get much smaller. We talked a little bit about a month ago about seriousness and how it's the dread of the unexpected outcome of possibility. And which is hard because we're craving possibility. Our soul wants possibility, but our mind isn't quite sure how to handle it because a possibility is unpredictable. So when we get serious, we do this. We bring it in here. We take the periphery, the scene more of life, and we zero it in to get serious, to get the result. And you add the speed of AI, and it creates an even greater contraction in our nervous system. But what if it got to be play? What if it got to be art? What if there got to be a more dynamic relationship? What if the artificial intelligence was the scalable part of what we do? And what if the authentic intelligence, our side, was the irreplaceable side of what we do? What if we embraced the things that it can replace, the things that it can scale in ways that are unreal, so that we could have more time, more energy, and more space to identify and expand and optimize and amplify what is actually irreplaceable about us? Rather than focusing on what it is replacing, why not take advantage of it to have it replace what, if it can replace, is probably going to be helpful to be replaced so that you can start to expand your vision and your energy and your time to be able to put more into what could never be replaced. Not all of us are actually in touch with what those things are in ourselves. We'll talk a little bit more later about how to do that, how to be able to become more in touch with what is irreplaceable about you. It's a really important part of this equation. So it's really important right now, I think, as just a check-in wherever you are in your life. I think these are helpful questions regardless at any time in any season, but I think they are especially helpful right now with the speed of technology, the brace of the nervous system, and all the things that are happening today. The first question is, where are you gripping right now? If you think about it, think about your life, think about your responsibilities, think about your fears, what you're excited about, all the different things. Right now, with the speed of the world, the speed of technology, if you get really honest with yourself, where are you gripping right now? What parts of your life are you trying to hold on to, like that car that accelerated so fast you just needed something reliable to grab onto, even though it's actually a part of the vehicle that's going really fast? It tends to give us this sense of control, gives us this sense of well-being. But oftentimes in our lives, what we're holding on to, what we're gripping, we are resisting. We are holding it back from being able to show us something greater, even the irreplaceable parts of ourselves. So just taking some time and just a few minutes right now here in this session is not enough. This is a powerful question to sit with, to consider, to play in, to carry with you. Where am I gripping in my life right now? And what am I trying to hold still? Okay? If any of you are parents or have been parents, you certainly know what that feels like, to try and get things to hold still. Not just when you have young kids, but even when they get older, when you just want the memories, when you want them to just stop growing up for a little while. But just taking a look at what in my life did I not realize, and what in my life do I realize I'm wanting to hold still, or I'm trying to get to hold still rather than letting it move and flow and expand. Because the contradiction of so much inside of us trying to grip and hold on and get things to hold still, and yet on the outside of us, we're trying to work to expand possibilities, to be surprised by life and create all these things. That tug of war is exhausting. It's really exhausting. So we want to start learning and leaning into leveraging the convenience of technology, leveraging what is allowing us to live more convenient lives than ever before and be able to soften some of the things that are causing us to have busier, more stressful lives, those thoughts per minute we were talking about. Why are we chasing the speed of technology with the speed of our thoughts? Why not allow technology to take care of the speed and we get to spend more time being? Wouldn't that be a beautiful reason for the convenience of this technology? Well, I believe one of the greatest keys for artificial intelligence to be able to serve you in that way is to have a very rooted, grounded, connected relationship with authentic intelligence. Well, what is authentic intelligence? Well, authentic intelligence is that whole body mindset, that head mind, that heart mind, and that gut mind. Authentic intelligence is the head doing the knowing and the mapping. So it knows and it maps. That's what it's going to be great at. That's what it should be great at. The heart gets to do the resonating and the attuning. We'll want to allow it to resonate and to be able to be still enough and connected enough to it to feel that resonance, not think that resonance, to feel that resonance. Let the thinking do the knowing and the mapping. Let the heart do the resonating and the attuning, the connecting. And let the gut do the senses and the moves, not just the senses and the moves in general, but the sensing and the moving before language, meaning before thought, even. We're in a distorted nervous system in this contracting thoughts per minute, distressing, all the different things that we're trying to do by chasing technology rather than allowing it to serve us. All of these things, when our gut is distorted, it causes us to feel sensations and move faster than our thoughts, that by the time we think, we have created sensations and made moves that we assumed were just how it is. And so if we think the world is unsafe, we're going to create sensations that it's unsafe, and we're going to make moves that cause it to look unsafe before we even have constructed our conscious thoughts. It's how we become self-fulfilling prophecies. And remember, those gut mind strategies, those survival strategies were put into place usually in most of us in the first 18 months to 2 years of our life. And so we're going to want to bring authentic intelligence into our use of artificial intelligence of any kind, technology of any kind. Be able to distinguish and balance the knowing and the mapping of the head mind. Be able to allow and embrace the resonating and the attuning of the heart mind. And to be able to heal and soften the sensing and moving of the gut mind that happens faster than your thoughts, so that it can respond to actual threat rather than the infinite amount of existential threat we seem to be creating today. 100,000 years ago, we had a finite amount of things that threatened us. They were significant, but they were finite. Dangerous predators, illness. They were pretty finite, pretty simple, pretty dangerous. Today, we've swapped out how dangerous they actually are for tons and tons of existential threats. You no longer walk out your door and have a saber-toothed tiger waiting in the bushes for a meal that it desperately needs. You walk out your door with a piece of technology in your hand that shows you all the reasons you shouldn't like yourself instantly, that creates a need for gratification or recognition on platforms that when you get a certain comment or don't get interactions can have a reaction similar to that predator ready to jump at you and eat you for lunch. So finding that authentic intelligence, finding the framework, the technology of you is what's going to allow you to take advantage of the convenience of technology without having to chase it. Allow you to be able to optimize finding what is irreplaceable about you rather than running in fear and trying to keep up with everything because we got to go fast. We got to automate. You got to learn this stuff, which is a distorted fear response. It is a serious response to AI. But AI, AI is amazing at one of those three things. The head mind's desire to map and know, the heart mind to resonate and attune, and the gut to sense and move. Guess which one AI is amazing at? The head mind. It's amazing at the knowing and the mapping. It is really phenomenal at the knowing and the mapping. A few weeks ago, Sunday afternoon, I'm sitting there on my laptop playing with my open AI agent and building some websites, building a couple of psychoanalytic assessments because I wanted to experiment with a few different things and see if it might be something I would want to use with clients by putting in some of my favorite psychological models, some of my favorite neurological philosophy, some of my favorite test taking mechanisms, and being like, hey, what would this look like if we put this all together? I'm doing all this for a few hours. And one time I stop and I look at my wife and I go, honey, what I just did in 3 hours, I would have paid over $150,000 and probably waited 6 months to get it all done before this. That's rad. That is cool. If we go into that with obligation, with over 300 thoughts per minute in our brain's tachometer and contracting while trying to speed up, whew, no wonder we have people demonizing it. No wonder we have people rebelling against it because they hadn't connected to their authentic intelligence yet. They were already self-abandoning before they even added the speed of technology. Now, there are ways to use both to figure each other out, but we're going to want to be less head-mind dominant, which ironically is exactly what AI is best at, is the head-mind part. And that's what we have overdeveloped. It's almost as if the generations that felt unseen and in some degree manifested social media, it's almost like we seemed to know that we were head brain dominant, we were neocortex dominant, and we needed something to help us relieve that pressure. And suddenly here's AI that is so good at the knowing and mapping that maybe we might be able to use that to carry some of that load so we have more energy, more presence, more time to heal and align and work with the resonance and attuning of the heart mind, to be able to heal the distorted and sympathetic nervous system responses of the gut mind and its sensing and moving before we even have language and thought. How cool is that to consider like, oh, we kind of knew some part of us, our superconscious self, I guess, if you want to call it, our higher self. I'm not as concerned about what it actually is as much as it's kind of rad that that looks to be what it's doing if we'll allow it to, if we'll partner with it a little bit differently. Kind of cool, right? Like kind of cool that when we start to realize in the biointelligent chemistry of our bodies, of our human experience, that it is the head mind overreaching and being overdeveloped in our domesticated society that creates so much of our unnecessary pain and suffering that suddenly we have a technology to help ease the load on that. But it also makes sense due to the nature of the head mind that it's very threatened by that. Because it felt like it had to take over for the heart mind and the gut mind because of trauma and shame and attachment wounds and generational things. And so anytime we invite the head mind to slow down a little bit, we invite ourselves to be a little bit more in our body rather than reliant on our thoughts, we oftentimes get a little bit of a threatening response. So it makes sense that our natural instinct, not natural because it's our original instructions, but natural because of what we've been through and the distortions thereof, is to be afraid of it. Here is, I think, the ultimate question for tonight. I think this will determine more than anything in the quality of your life when it comes to dancing with technology, when it comes to dancing with AI. Especially, and as most people that are drawn to listen to anything I have to say, for leaders and coaches and guides and healers that are connected to and authentically inspired by the work of transformation and impact and improving their lives and other people's lives, especially for that population. And here is the critical question of the night. And this is something you want to ask along the way. You want to start your day with this, start any project you want to work on with this. Am I using this to hide me or to amplify me? Can we get really honest about that? I've done both. I've convinced myself I was doing some things to amplify me, but then it didn't feel connected. It didn't feel aligned. And when I got really honest, it was like, oh, you deceived yourself, which we're really good at, by the way. We're really good at deceiving ourselves. It's a protective mechanism. We're not intentionally jerks to ourselves. We deceive ourselves to protect ourselves. But I had some self-deception and it didn't feel like I wanted it to afterwards. That's a pretty key indicator that we were deceiving ourselves with sometimes what we were doing. That's a little harder to deceive yourself from what you're doing, but it's certainly a little easier to deceive yourself with how you're doing it and why you're doing it, especially. And that's what you're getting to, the heart of why you're doing something, your real intent. The quality of your intention and the quality of your attention are forms of touch. And we touch this world far more with the quality of our intention and the quality of our intention than we do with our hands. And so having the sensitivity as if we were going to place our hands on another person, having that respect, that sensitivity, that consent, and allowing that to go into the sensitivity of the quality of our intention and our attention, you can see why it's so important to be honest about, am I using this to hide? Or am I using this to amplify? And guess what? It's okay if you notice you're using it to hide. That's okay. That's honest. That means you can meet yourself there. You can actually learn to understand where that's coming from rather than be embarrassed by it, shamed by it, and need to fix it, which is going to cause more speed, more stress, more burnout, and more looping in the same stuff. We won't want, you don't want to be ashamed and guilty for wanting to hide. We want to meet that part of ourselves like the abused kitten in the cardboard box that we just brought home. Let's not be aggressive and tell that kitten it's dumb for hiding from us. We want to understand why so we can be gentle and present. And then eventually the trust starts to return. Safety starts to be applied even in the midst of the speed of technology. So that's, I think, a really powerful question to consider. Judith, I saw you came off mute. Did you have a question?
Oh, yeah, you had made a point where, I think we were saying using it to hide or to amplify us. So in my experience, I do both with
Hmm.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. And guess what? There is nothing wrong with that. You know where it gets a little painful? When we convinced ourselves we were using it to amplify, but we were actually using it to hide. And so we were expecting an amplified result and we got a hiding result. That difference, that deficit is hard.
Mhm.
You know, I've even gone into using technology, even AI, to hide, and then got about halfway through it and realized, like, yeah, you're doing this to hide. What if you didn't need to? And while I was doing it, I got to feel through that and notice it. And even in some cases, and I'll show you guys a way how to learn how to do this, had AI help me unpack why I was trying to hide in the process of the project I was working on or whatever was going on.
It's good at that sometimes.
Yeah, right?
Ask it to self-reflect. Say,
Hmm.
read everything you know about me. Be insanely honest with me. Tell
Yep.
me what you think, and it'll tell you because I have a master prompt built in telling it how it needs to be authentic with me and
Yep.
and
And
be
like a lot
brutally
of
honest,
us, we don't
so
all understand, but like a lot of us, most AI platforms are built initially to people please,
yes,
which
mine's
makes
told
sense because the more
specifically
they can
not to
please
do that.
you, the more you'll use them.
Hmm.
And when you take a people pleaser using a artificial intelligence people pleaser, that can be a really interesting spiral sometimes. But I love that you've already put work into some master prompts and some different things like that. I'm going to talk about some really phenomenal resources to take that to even a next level after this. So,
Yeah, it actually I'm using it right now to write a book. Okay, but it's a true story, so it's not writing the book. I
yeah.
have to. put in what I want, it just helps me kind of rearrange some of my thoughts with it.
Hmm.
And so I'll ask it to go back and self-reflect over everything and tell me where, um, like I'll have a time when I'm just like stuck in my head and I can write really well that way.
Yeah,
And then I'll ask it to go back and self-reflect. What is this telling me, telling you about me? And it's pretty interesting when it comes back with.
I love it. And that's similar to what the greatest authors were actually doing when they wrote their books. They were having an experience with it rather than too many people are writing a book just to have a book to get it done. And I love what you're describing, Judith. You're having an experience with you, with yourself, with it. And I think that's awesome. So, Heather, just real quick, and then we gotta keep going.
Yeah, no, it's just fascinating to me. I haven't worked with any of the AI like it just that you're externalizing the self. It's
Hmm.
like if you can't solve the problem on the level of the mind and you're working with the mind map, like it's as the quality is as good as what you put in it, right? So whether it's
Hmm.
self-reflecting, it's I just don't understand that. And I know it's interesting. I really resonated with feelings of safety and it moving too fast and wanting familiarity and control. And like, I can't wait to re-listen to this. There's so much there. Every word of yours is like encyclopedia, but like, I just, the externalizing the self, like, it's just
Hmm.
such a bizarre feeling. Like, it's
Yeah.
just one that does not evoke excitement or a sense of safety. It's more of control. And no one's going to know me better than I know myself. Maybe they can organize my thoughts. Maybe they can keep me from doing a run-on sentence. But it's such a curious dance.
Hmm.
It is. But when you use it a lot and you write it things out and stuff like that, and then you tell it to go back. And like I use it, I'll have a thought and I'll just throw it in there, and see what happens, and stuff like that all the time. So
Yeah.
it gets used to, then you can go back and say, but there's also a lot of times where sometimes it pulls from what it comes back and tells you, and that self-reflects sometimes in what it comes back again and tells you.
Yep.
So you've got to be careful to be able to weed this out.
And
Mm.
what we're talking about right now, Heather, I love the point you just brought up that it's an externalization. You could ask, you know, somewhat rhetorically, what isn't in this life? What isn't other than thinking inside of our own selves? What out here is not a potential externalization of ourselves? And the same rules apply. If we have a lack of intrinsic self-trust, we have a
Mm.
lack of intrinsic sense of self, and we have a lack of intrinsic worthiness, then we're going to use things outside of us to make up for a deficit, which is like the ultimate bypass. Everything from technology to medication to psychedelics to therapy to leaders we admire and programs we buy and food programs and food that we eat and everything. If there is a major distortion in that whole body mindset, if there's a major distortion of self and our intrinsic worth and worthiness, our intrinsic
Mm.
trust, not our cognitive, our intrinsic, our resonance of self, then the tendency is to use the external element to to replace us, to replace the thing we don't believe about ourselves, to
Mm.
replace the confidence we don't think we have, to replace what we're ultimately doing is we're trying to replace what is irreplaceable. And that's where I see people get into trouble the most in AI, is when they go into it not realizing their intrinsic deficits that
Mm.
they have been trying to compensate for and make up for in their lives all along. And so, because they have coped with it so much and compensated with it so much, it makes it hard to notice when you go into the externalization of the technology that you're really wanting it to fill in the gaps that aren't gaps.
Yeah.
They're distorted beliefs. They're things that you don't that we're not going there to learn something in terms of who we are. We're learning to unlearn what got in the way of just being able to be who we are. And then we're going to technology to scale that. We're going to technology to be able to organize certain things, to do some of the knowing and the mapping that we've been relying so heavily on, applying the knowing and the mapping to the heart and the knowing and the mapping to the gut, somewhat to our detriment. Here's another really, really important point. So I think the question of, am I using this to hide or am I using this to amplify? It's similar to a question I've heard from a really popular book of, am I above or below the line? Am I above or below the line? And I don't think the question of, am I above the line or below the line, is an evaluation, like a grade, like pass fail, like, oh, you're below the line, you're a horrible person. I think it's actually a genuine orientation of where you're at. And where you're at is the most important place to be. And I don't think there should be any shame around that, even if it's below the line, even if it's, I've noticed I'm wanting to use this to hide. Well, meet yourself there. Don't force yourself through that. People can feel that. And they may not even have words for it, but it seems society and people are feeling that more and more and more. People are becoming more sensitive to the schemes, more sensitive to the manipulations. And the birth of most of those was the unconscious and unintentional desire to bypass, to be manipulated, which made them manipulating in reverse. So really interesting pieces for us to consider. Now, in this era of collapsing certainty that is going to allow us to birth wonder and awe, in the speed of technology and AI, the leaders and the coaches who will matter the most coming into this and moving into the future are not those who move the fastest, not those who automate the most. They are the ones who remain the most human, the most present, and the most honest in the midst of the speed and the automation. It doesn't mean that they won't consider speed and automation, but never at the expense of being human. In fact, they will find the authentic intelligence to use the speed and the convenience and the automation to be able to be more human, to be able to be more present, and to be able to be more honest, which are very difficult things to do when the mode that so many people have already been living their lives in has been fear and prevention, to either drive them or hide them. And you have the speed of this technology, and you can see why it amplifies things so much.
Yeah.
You can see why it causes us to want to hide even more. And AI is not your competition. It's really not. AI is not your competition. It is an invitation. I think that's really the ultimate way to look at this. And any threat to that is not inherent to the technology. It is inherent to the mirror that technology can be, the mirror that so many externalized things can be, and not the mirror as an indictment or a judgment. Even that is an invitation to look at yourself a little softer, to look at yourself with a little bit more compassion that we believe is lazy, or we believe is ineffective, or we even believe is dangerous. Why? Because of that distorted system. Not because of the reality of the world, because the reality of the way the distorted system projects the world back to us. And we have the opportunity today with AI and many other technologies to soften our grip on certainty, to soften our focus on the illusion of control, to loosen the grip and invite wonder and accept the invitation to find what is irreplaceable about us in the midst of so many things that are replaceable, that we didn't need to be carrying, we didn't need to do all on our own. To be able to find that support, to be able to be more human, more honest, and to be more present. I think that's pretty rad. I think that's pretty awesome. Now, to help with that, as we're wrapping up our time here, I put together a guide. This guide has a 14-day ritual for you to go through with any AI platform you want, to be able to follow this every day to be able to teach and show any AI platform you want how to best serve you. And the best way to do that is for it to get to know you. And the coolest thing about it is I haven't had anyone do it, even very self-aware, very advanced spiritual journey people learn even more about themselves in the process of teaching this, teaching who they are to their AI piece. It also has, for those of you who just want something a little bit simpler or kind of in addition to that, it has 10 questions you will want to make sure you ask AI to learn more about you. If you jump right to those, I would hope that you only do that if you've already had a lot of interaction with AI, if it's already had a lot of things that you've written, a lot of things that you've said, a lot of things that are expressions of you. Okay? But it also has 10 questions that you will want to have AI ask you to have it be able to help you better and more focused. I give you 5 of the best prompts that I could construct to help you write better. Specifically, I use the construct of emails. Okay, it's still very much alive and well in today's market, you know. So, 5 masterfully constructed prompts that will help you write better emails to people today based on how people's nervous systems and how society is shifting today, not what has worked in the past. If there's something we know about the speed of technology and something we know about this beta condition that we're in right now, for any of you that know anything about spiral dynamics and human development, we're in a beta condition right now. It means we're in the hallway between 2 rooms in society. And sometimes the hallway is a scary place to be. But we're about to move into a new room that has different rules, that has different associations. They won't be totally different. We moved from the room of hunter-gatherer to agricultural. We moved from the room of agricultural to primarily agrarian, from agrarian to industrial, from industrial to technological. And I believe we're about to move into a room that is something to do with conscious coherence, being coherent biointelligently. And that's a wonder and an awe to be in. The wonder and awe to be able to be present and still be surprised. To be able to be honest and still be open. Okay? To be able to be aware but still be relaxed. I think it's a really cool place to be that we've been craving, and one of the reasons it's been hard to get there is because of very overactive minds. And so we created something that can carry a lot of the load of our overactive minds if we'll let it, and allow us to put a little bit more attention, a little bit more presence into authenticity. And this guide is there to help you do that, whether you are a total novice and beginner and haven't ever even used an AI platform before, or those of you that are more advanced and want to use it in a way that is already integrated with your mission, personally, professionally, whatever that might be. So if you want that, all I ask is that you just send me an email and just say, send me the guide, or I want the guide, or you could even just type guide. Okay, it doesn't have to be complicated. Just email me. All of you should have my email. It's how you got the invite to this, or how you got the invite to watch the recording of this. Just send an email to paul@wholebodymindset.com, and within the next day or 2, I will send that guide off to you. And it's an extraordinary exercise. It's a great externalization. It's a phenomenal mirror, whether you end up using AI heavily in what you do or not. And going through that process and seeing the way these things are built and understanding authentic intelligence, being able to distinguish and more beautifully and playfully dance with the head mind mapping and knowing, and allowing the heart mind to attune and resonate, and healing the gut mind so that it can sense and move in a way that supports you, not in a way that makes everything feel like it's after you, make everything feel like it's happening to you. Then I think that's pretty worth it. And we might just be able to find ourselves doing things that we didn't think were our preference or our generation or whatever else. Because if there's something that is being very clear right now, as scary it is to watch things that we've held to pretty firmly start to go away, there are so many more things when we're willing to turn around, so many more possibilities that to a distorted nervous system is threat and scary. But to a present, honest, and grounded nervous system is wonder and awe. And I hope that that's something that we can step into just a little bit more today with strategy with intention, with a willingness to feel like a beginner. That's one of my favorite things about technology is it moves so fast that you have no shortage of opportunities to feel like a beginner. And not just feel like a beginner so that you can know you're headed to becoming an expert. What if you just loved feeling like a beginner for the sake of feeling like a beginner? Because guess what most beginners are? Young. Why wouldn't we want to just feel young all the time? It was playful. It was silly to be a beginner. Making mistakes were experiments, not indictments. And I believe we're going to have more room for that wonder and awe. Will it be scary? Will it be wild? Will there be still plenty of people that watch this and are still convinced that the world is out to get them? Yeah, and I'm not here to convince anybody that it's not, because that energy is the very thing that might have gotten them stuck in those loops. So, but thank you for your attention and your time tonight. Thank you for being here. Thank you for what you shared, what you asked. It was a pleasure to spend time with each of you, and I hope we get an opportunity to interact again in the near future.
Thank you, Paul.
Of
Thank you
course.
so, thank you so very much. Really,
Good
really
night.
love it. Good night.